expounding much more on this and other political developments in our country.
Stephen Mbide for that interview, one that gives us a picture of the events and circumstances surrounding that injury to the president of the National Unity Platform, Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, last evening in Bulindo. And as you've heard from his lawyer, George Musisi, an operation is due to be undertaken today at St. Francis Hospital in Nsambya to remove some of the fragments of a canister that was hurled at the car in which he was set to travel, and of course they are occasioned upon him. We shall be following that story and bringing you the developments as and when it happens. Our subsequent bulletins, NTV at 1, NTV Akaongezi, as well as NTV Tonight, will be at hand with the most comprehensive comment, analysis, as well as news of the day. Allow me now return to the studio for our Kickstarter discussion, where we are looking at the strategic framework on the terror threat. This is, of course, on the backdrop of the terror alert that was issued by the United States and the United Nations in line with the September 9/11 attacks anniversary that it will be coming up in a few days' time. The questions are lingering. Is this particular alert one that should be taken in the stead of a terror alert, or a precautionary statement that was issued because there is a tendency by militants and those who occasion terror upon communities across the globe to also want to be part of commemorations? In studio, I have with me seasoned security analysts who will be telling us exactly what is happening and maybe offer us perspective that will help us understand what the United States and the United Nations are saying for now. I'm joined by Dr. Tolit Atia. He's from the Center for Strategic Studies and Analysis at Nkumba University. Many thanks for making it.
Thank you, and good morning, viewers.
And on my extreme left is seasoned security analyst, Ambassador Simon Mulongo from Eamons Frontier Governance and Security Consultancy. Many thanks for joining us too.
Thank you so much, Chris. Good morning, our very good viewers.
Before I delve into the framework on strategic terror threats in the region in light of what was issued by the United States and the United Nations, allow me speak about the state of security in the country right now. In light of events last evening, I would be remiss if I do not get perspective from seasoned security commentators on what lies ahead for Uganda as the temperatures begin to rise ahead of the 2026 general election. The attack, as we describe it right now, on the principle of the National Unity Platform is but a harbinger of what might happen if events that have happened before in Uganda are anything to go by, especially for those who have watched and follow. Just very briefly, what do you make of this whole situation? Let me begin with Ambassador Mlogo.
Thank you. I think the security situation in terms of the run-up to elections is first of all, the security in the country is generally calm and peaceful, though we have some incidents in the frontier border areas like bordering Congo and the Sudan. But generally the country, other than some irregular robberies and murders and all this, but politically speaking, the country is very stable and very calm. Now, regarding the incident that happened yesterday, which I don't have much facts about, as the heat rises, the stakes also are higher because everybody is trying to reposition oneself, either as an individual or as a political organization or party, to make a niche well in time before the actual campaign rolls out. So I think this definitely, as like in other experiences in the past, goes with certain incidents that may border on breaches of peace, and we like you to see a number of such incidents where there are running battles between some actors with the law enforcers, the police. I saw yesterday the chief of CID warning about those who are intent to creating trouble just to have their way, and some want to use extra means to make sure that they do certain activities either to attract attention or to or wrongly or correctly so run into trouble with the police. Okay. So definitely these incidents are likely to rise as we go towards the hotline of elections.
Okay. Dr. Atia, this has so much deja vu on it. It is something we've seen before, and not that I want to be a prophet of doom, but we're bound to see this a lot as we prepare for the general election.
Yeah, oh sure. Thanks, Chris, and good morning, viewers, once again. I tend to agree a lot with Ambassador Mlongo on the general situation of security in the country. There is certainly calm, there is predictability, and I'm one of those who is inclined or was inclined to believe that given what we have gone through as a country before, especially the excitement around political years or political election years, we should not be seeing what we are seeing at the moment. You know, when you use the word deja vu, it triggers my mind and reminds me of that history romanticism of the Bourbons and the Bourbons learning
Never
nothing,
learning anything,
and you know,
forgetting nothing.
Surely, I think much more seriously, the police, our police, do a commendable job. They work tirelessly hard, and I trust they have an integrity that they need to keep. So it bothers me that the police doesn't seem to want to strive, you know, to make this marked difference between, say, the police and the military force and agencies. Because police force should be able to be restrained, particularly if police is deeply engaged and committed to community policing and intelligence-driven policing. I don't see why these escalations should arise. So I think the police has a bit of homework to do, in my view, because we're going into an exciting time.
That's right.
And it would be very unfortunate, because this already, it's still too soon to set this kind of tempo. Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Now let's delve into the gist of our Kickstarter debate this morning. And of course, the police still lingers very large because a statement has already come out, and the spokesperson says that Ugandans should be confident that security is tight and that any threats can be countered as and when they come. But in light of the precautionary statement that was issued by the United States and of course backed by the United Nations, I'm still trying to find where the United Nations comes in here. Previous alerts have been issued entirely by the United States and the UK. We don't hear so much from the United Nations, but maybe you will be able to help us on that. Is this a routine alert or a simple precautionary measure that should be undertaken by citizens of the United States, as has been the tradition before? Let me begin with you.
Okay, Chris, you know, let's first try to put terrorism to context. Terrorism is quite a serious issue. And terrorism, in my view, and many commentators, tend to look at it as the future wars, and a very complicated one. It has had the ability, you know, to even bite right hard. In 2003, a special representative of the Secretary General, Sergio Vieira, was a victim of terrorism in Baghdad, alongside about another 150 people. So the United Nations, by the way, right from about 1972, took cognizance of terrorism and has had a number of deliberations, has created a number of institutions, including cooperative arms, because it's already quite clear amongst nation states that fighting terrorism sole-handedly cannot be possible. So when you see the US come out, there are numerous UN resolutions or protocols that urge nations to take responsibility of human security of its citizens, and by extension, probably neighbors, shared borders. So when you see the US coming up with these terror alerts, there are two things at play. One is that the US is one of the foursome states in this globe we are living in. They have advanced intelligence. They have operational fronts, intelligence fronts in most of Africa, and with a continuing situation, say in Somalia, now Sudan, the borders of Kenya and Somalia with the Al-Shabaab, the Congo with the ADF, which is now probably operating as the Islamic chapter in the Islamic nation state chapter in Central Africa. I think there's interest. So we owe it to them and need to accept that they probably have an edge in this information they get, or intelligence they get, and coupled with these UN obligations, and being a country that positions itself as a superpower, definitely
global police.
Yeah, there is interest to contribute to global peace. And I think that's why we continue seeing these terror alerts. How serious can we take this? Of course, anytime, any terror alert needs to be taken seriously. The question of how prepared we are, or how much we chew on information we get in terms of how we deploy, who we deploy, is probably another matter for us to discuss as a country.
Okay, thank you very much. Ambassador Mulongo, I'm sure you do agree pretty much with what Dr. Atia says, but I want to understand, and very specifically, whether Uganda and Kampala, for that matter, finds itself in the line of fire or the line of sight for terrorists yet again, especially given that we've had a series of attacks before that have occasioned our own incursions into the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank my colleague, Dr. Atia, for very good expose on on the elements of terrorism, the landscape of terrorism. Back here, you want to know whether it can strike Uganda again, the terrorism. The answer is yes or no. No, because Uganda has taken a lot of precautionary measures using the security architecture that we have. We've created counterterrorism measures in all security institutions, including joint centers where we do activities jointly, say between the military, police, and intelligence services that work around the clock to make sure that they forestall an attempt by terrorists to occasion an act on our land. But yes, because we are very actively involved in counter-terrorism campaigns, both in the region like Somalia and also in DRC, as Doctor has just said, and also in Central Africa. So the terrorists will not rest until they strike at the most painful part of our border as a country. They do every time, all the time, planning to do that. And the fact that the proximity to Somalia and the DRC is just a river away, the terrorists always try to create cells. And indeed, we have cells of terrorism in Uganda, only that the degree of operations of those cells is normally negligible. But that doesn't mean that they are totally out of gas. They can actually strike. So it is also possible that they can strike.
Okay. All right. That's a good one. Now, in light of the 9/11 September being the anniversary of what was no doubt the most daring attack on the United States by Islamists or any other person in the last 40 years, means that militants and Islamists or terrorists, to be very specific, are also planning their own commemoration of this event, and it's why the United States is actually very worried and hoping that its citizens across the world can pay attention to this very interesting fact. But of course, let me delve into the fourth aspect of the United States strategy after 9/11. We saw the attack on Afghanistan as the very first one. We saw the attack on Iraq as the very second. The country also established a special department of Homeland Security, but also went out to lead a coordinated global response of actions in what came to be known as counter-terrorism strategy. This one involves all countries and other players who are pivotal in ensuring that this information is gotten on time and acted on as efficiently or as swiftly as possible. Uganda has positioned itself as a lead actor in this strategy across the region. No doubt Somalia has been pacified, mostly by Uganda People's Defense Forces led initiatives, and then that has also occasioned upon us the target for terror, because we are pacifying. That means whoever is rubbed the wrong way in Somalia wants to attack at any one point in time, and like you said, this can happen anytime, nothing specific in terms of day, month, or even year. How prepared are we right now when it comes to holding off very sophisticated attacks, since the advent of technology is presenting a whole new challenge? I know you have an idea about the infrastructure that we have, but the terrorists today are thinking sometimes steps ahead of governments. I do not know whether we have an idea about what could be the posture that we have, but most importantly, the strategy at hand. Is it possible to involve each and everyone at their level? Because over the last 1 year or two, we haven't heard so much from the security forces. It's until the terror alert came through that the police says, "Oh no, everything is okay." But Are you aware of our strategy when it comes to terror, away from waiting for the United States, the UK, or even the United Nations to help us on interception of communication of terrorists across the world?
Yeah, Chris, you raise a couple of points and quite a mouthful. So just not sure.
Okay.
Just not sure how to dive in. But I think 3 features come out.
First, readiness.
Yes.
Second, how we align to the U.S. strategy on counterterrorism across the globe. And then exactly how we must be able to deal with this. Because is this for Kampala and Uganda, or it's been issued across all embassies around the world? Okay,
first of all, like just to recap on what I'd said, at the international scene, there is definitely active engagement on terrorism and counterterrorism efforts. And you find this right from within the United Nations spectrum, and it cascades down to nation states. And one of the most visible frameworks that is seen is that states that have greater capability, like the United States and the European states, have a responsibility, under the obligation to support and maintain global peace, to support states that are struggling, for lack of a better word, or those that are growing in the footsteps. Now, Uganda, particularly, and we find ourselves in the East Africa region and the Horn, and this is a region that is a hot spot. Couple of conflicts, not only terrorism, but there are also what you'd call the entire nexus of the growing international crime, cyber crime, international transboundary crimes, including illegal trade in wildlife and wildlife products, money laundering. Yeah, and this finds real gravity given also the level of our technology, as you talk about it, because our securities or our security architecture is adapting, but probably needs to double its pace, particularly because of the challenges presented by technology. You find what is going on today is that we no longer have the rush folds of people taking up a bush, making an inch loan, and then, conflict has shifted. Yeah. Conflict has shifted to the center of soft power. The future wars we are seeing are predicted around conflict, say around natural resource, water. You're seeing the situation between the difficult situation between Ethiopia and Egypt. In our own case, we are caught up in this frontier. We cannot go into all this history of Somalia, but the Somali case is very active. We have the Al-Qaeda coming into Somalia since 2005. They have taken effect, they have taken terrain, and they continue to dislodge. So, what is it that we have to do? One of the key things is capacity, continued capacity building. And I think this is happening. Of course, the fronts are numerous. Ambassador Mlongo already narrated. We have all these cooperation frameworks in the region. But what probably continues to dog us is the question of just how best can we be out there and how best can we find our right foot. Now, when you relate this particularly to analytical frameworks like how do you review your own actions to learn from them, then for me, two things come to the fore. One is that there is evidence coming out of research that, for instance, the issue of terrorism is seriously getting intertwined with the broader question of governance, because these terrorist cells or centers continue to recruit, and one of their major targets is to recruit amongst marginalized communities. Now, what are marginalized communities? You find that most of these are people who are faced with socio-economic challenges. So that is very much a governance issue. Then second, there is also evidence in research that is pointing towards the fact that our security managers or handlers or agencies, when they encounter terrorists, particularly one in terms of how they enlist information from them, get them to get prosecuted and all this. Because, like for instance, we've heard of reports of so many people being arrested. Every other time there is a terror threat, or like the recent bombings in Kampala, or the assassinations related to ADF and all that. So there is a question of anger. How these people are handled is also enlisting anger. So we have gotten to know that there are some people who are joining these cells or attracted to these cells just because of the mere thought around the way they were treated, which gets them angry, and then the interest to revenge.
Okay. I'm afraid I'm going to have to halt you in your tracks there, but of course that's a very solid submission. Ambassador, when we return from the break, we would love to understand why the warnings always have to come from the United States first before we can be seen to be acting on any. Don't we have the capacity to detect on our own, even if it's not as thorough as the United States can, in order to be able to act on certain aspects? Or is it down to the fact that the security forces won't communicate what they know until maybe the United States does? That is a perception question. When we return, Ambassador Mlongo will be taking us through what it means. Welcome back. I'm glad you're still with us here. The Kickstarter, we are discussing the security threats and the alert that was issued by the United States and the United Nations in light of the upcoming September 9/11 anniversary. That, of course, commemorates the day the United States was attacked, and that particular incident saw planes run into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, as well as some fields in Pennsylvania. And of course that shifted the architecture across the globe on how nations fight terror. It has been a concerted effort in what has come to be known as the global counter-terrorism strategy. Uganda, for its part, as a strategic partner within the East African region, and indeed Africa, has been at the forefront. No doubt that when an alert comes through from the United States, Uganda must pay close attention. We've been victims before. In 2010, Chadondo, and of course the Ethiopian village bombings, but also more recently at Parliamentary Avenue, actions or attacks that conditioned our incursion into the Democratic Republic of Congo. In studio this morning, I have with me Ambassador Simon Mulongo, as well as Dr. Tolit Atia, seasoned security analysts who are helping us, of course, with perspective on these matters. Before we went into the break, I'd promised Ambassador Mulongo on why you should be on the spot, more or less. Why do we have a problem of communication on terror as a nation? So much so that it's always the United States that we hear from first before we also roll out our own communication. Is it also part of the strategy, or it is a major lapse that must be rectified?
Yeah, well, travel advisories have a history. They're issued by those countries, starting with the U.S., I think around the First World War, when they're warning about the nationals traveling to Europe.
That's right.
At that time. And we've had continuous, as Dr. Tia did point out, in the 70s and intensifying in the 80s and post 9/11. Now, the advisories are supposed to alert, guide, inform a given country's citizens traveling to another destination. They are not meant to inform or provide security intelligence to that destination country. So they're just like telling, if it is the US, they're telling the Americans, you're going to Uganda, but beware of 1, 2, 3. And on the side of the UN does not issue the same way like the
US does.
The US or France or UK or Australia. But usually they communicate through their channels to their staff to beware of certain likely risks.
The US is a bit flamboyant when it comes to communicating.
Right, but it does, the UN as well does. And I want to tell the viewers that the advisories are available on every country across the globe, particularly by the US or the UK or Australia. And normally they shift because the world has been divided into a first world and second world, but time came when we became three. We became the developing one, and then the developed one, then the transitioning one. Now there are 5.
Emerging one.
Yes, now 5. Now we're, so depending on the category, if you're in the first world, you're Iceland, you're France, you're US, they don't issue advisories to them. Even if they issued, they will make some soft guidelines.
Yeah.
Even if there's a big incident. For example, there are more killings in America than Uganda.
That's right.
Per month, per day, per week.
Per hour.
Yes, even per hour. But there are no advisories
That's right.
on the land of the US. But they will come, if there is one murder in Uganda, then everything is up in flames. And also it depends on the policy outline at a given time. Because if, for example, a given country is seen to be rubbing the US the wrong way, they can just decide to look at what buttons to touch. If Uganda has not reeled enough under the weight of economic burden of lack of AGOA, what else can we touch? They can even go ahead and touch the button of tourism. Then they issue advisory just to curb the level of tourism.
That's right.
So that economically that country comes to reel under the weight of the burden of either debt and something like that. So we have to be very careful. Some advisories are informative, others are politically charged, and they aim at something else other than communicating the information. So in this regard, I do not want to think that they meant that Uganda is on fire or is going to be on fire. Because 9/11 had nothing to do with us. There was no 9/11 here. If there is a 9/11 celebration, it will be targeting those areas that are a focus of the U.S. And for that matter, they'll go to either the U.S. soil or look at maybe U.S. key installations that will hurt the U.S. So it has lesser likelihood in Uganda than somewhere else, in my own assessment. But of course, that also having been said, it would mean that even the Americans who are in Uganda can be targets, and that becomes important. Now, your question is, why is it that they are the ones who make announcements about this? It's because countries issuing advisories don't issue to themselves. So it's very rare, and in various circumstances, that the U.S. will issue an advisory in their own country. And if it happened, it means they have very significant and compelling circumstances that they want to alert potential victims. That's right. Uganda has done that. There are a couple of times where the police has issued warnings about potential terrorism attacks and advising people to be very cautious, and even issuing guidelines as to how the people should be on the lookout. Use your ears, your eyes, your senses to see somebody who is suspicious, the hotel owners to register, and all these kind of things. You've seen that happen a number of times. So for that matter, it's not true entirely that we do not issue advisories until when we hear. And in any case, those advisories from those countries, we take them with caution. Are they meant to say what they're saying, or they're meant to distort and communicate a policy position, either to hurt us or to injure us in one or the other? Okay. So Uganda, I just want to add what Dr. Tiots did say. We have a robust machinery for law and order, including counterterrorism. And I want to tell you that a lot of intelligence is collected, whether technical intelligence. There are a lot of technologies which we don't discuss out there, right, but are available, where the government is able to listen in potential people who can be harmful to us as a people, as our economy, as our technology, and so on. And the other one is we have human intelligence, where we have agents everywhere, including popular intelligence, which is harvested from the population, that walk in and inform the structured systems. Okay. We also have, of course, well-organized structures, whether in the police, whether in the military, whether in the civil intelligence services. Remember, out of all the 1,800 sub-counties in this country, we have an intelligence officer. And as if that's not enough, we're talking about a couple of thousands of parishes that have intelligence officers who listen in and report on any movements, unusual activities, and so on. So this should assure the country that at least Uganda has made a lot. I want to tell you, and I want to face the camera and state, a number of terror activities have been going on, but have been averted over time without telling the population. Why? Because the population is very vulnerable. Once you begin telling them certain things, they will become so sensitive, and it can be very disruptive instead of it being reassuring. It's like a medical condition. Some of us go and meet doctors and talk to them, but they'll not tell you that you have just a few weeks to go. They'll not tell you. And it's only very rare circumstances that they can tell you that, yes, you are suffering from this incurable disease and you have a very short time to live. So make preparations. So many times they don't tell you, because once they do that, the fear alone is going to worsen. So that's the same thing with the country. Okay. So the intelligence services do not, whether it is intelligence about health, intelligence about economy, intelligence about security threats, usually they don't communicate because it has a different effect to the country. But people are reassured. People would like to see that, as you said, maybe they may want to be reassured or explain certain incidences, like medical. There is medical intelligence.
Confidence.
Yes, so that there's maybe the Minister of Health should be able to issue an advisory or explanation that there is this wave of sickness and it is only this. Meteorology is also intelligence. They will tell you about the weather. And they have been actually giving us a lot of advisory in terms of the weather and climate conditions. So I think the government has been doing that. Maybe if you wish to suggest in certain areas that are not harmful, areas that are very encouraging and so on, that they should be able to come up. Some ministries, departments and agencies could actually issue certain either advisories or intelligence information so that it can help to guide the concerned communities.
Okay, thank you very much. And of course, Dr. Atia, I'm sure you do agree entirely, but I also understand that there was the African Security Council that convened last month, and apparently the discussion centered on what is being described as a lump sum of ideas for security and peace for Africa, focusing on Africa's needs and solutions. This continues to go on, the tendency to say, let's seek African solutions for African problems. But when it comes to security, I know that we cannot reason like that. Let's find African solutions to African security concerns. Do you have an idea about what the Council resolved on? Please, you can share.
Yeah, sure. The meeting you're talking about was actually promoted or supported by the United Kingdom, and particularly through its Nairobi embassy. And again, nothing out of the usual. It's still the same idea or notion of, trying to give a brother support. Terrorism or the creation of counter-terrorism messaging or cooperation across frameworks has been going on, and probably now we are trying to consolidate them. So that particular meeting you're talking about was actually focused on, improvised ideas, IEDs,
explosive devices.
Explosive devices. And again, like we said, with technology, these the explosive devices that we probably knew in the 90s, in the early 2000s, has dramatically changed. With the increased knowledge of science, with the abundant internet and sites, and we have this youth bulge. These young people are inquisitive, so they are going on these sites and learning all sorts of things. So there is need for our security actors to keep in touch. So this is one of those, and this one focused around the explosive devices, and then how to find out which could be the common framework, to share information and continue to review particular, country interventions. And then the issue of messaging, which is really, really, really critical. You're talking about communication.
That is right.
And I think, just to wrap it up, I do agree with Ambassador Mlongo on the issue of the restraint of communication in security matters to avoid excitement in the public. But I think, like I pointed out, there is an increasing nexus, especially in the changed architecture of security or insecurity, in that when you look at it in terms of human security, there are areas or territories that looked mundane, did not look elements of security threat, which have become security threats.
That's right.
For instance, you talked about health. Now, the issue of pandemics, you know, and that and its linkages, the issue of the issue of these young people and unemployment and all that, these social elements that are ebbed within governance. I think our nations need to build capability around strategic communication so that we increasingly begin to see security also as a public good.
Okay.
So that as you account for everything else, you are able to account for both quantity and quality of security for the cities.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tolit Atia, for that submission. What I do pick is that security has a need-to-know basis. Maybe the things that are being done behind the scenes, you may not need to know, but you are secure. When we return, we shall be talking about how the other aspects of terror, including the Islamization of communities, especially those that are vulnerable, including the unemployed, the poor, and the, well, those who are being turned from one religion to another, and what that plays into the whole terror threat equation. Stay with us. We'll be right back. All right, thank you very much for keeping it with us here. For those that are just joining us on board, we are glad that we now have all hands on deck. I'm just wondering, where have you been? But anyway, we shall ensure that our wrap does cater for aspects that you need to take home in as far as terrorism is concerned, and how these threats continue to evolve, and how exactly governments and indeed people must be able to come around and be able to fight whatever threats that have been occasioned upon us. In studio, I have with me Ambassador Simon Mulongo. He's from the Center for Security, rather from Emmons Frontier Governance and Security Consultancy, as well as Tolit Atia from the Center for Security Studies and Analysis at Nkumba University. These are very, very top notch thinkers when it comes to these matters. Ambassador, when we went into the break, I needed to shift the discussion to the narrative of winning minds and changing mindset as a critical tool in fighting terror. I do not know how far this strategy is embedded in the various rollout of interventions on the part of security agencies, but most importantly, government. The reason I say this is that the factors that allow for terrorism to take root are unemployment, poverty, and then the tendency for the young people to hook onto the internet and be able to do everything they can or want. And those answers can be gotten. Many of them have learned terror or become tolerant to terror as a result of learning things on the internet. Do you think we are scoring well on that front?
Thank you. Terrorism is a mindset. It's an ideology. It's a belief. It's something that you come to believe in, accept and believe in it wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
It's not about religion, it's not about a tribe. Usually it comes about when conditions for some people become desperate. And those conditions tend to hinge on the thinking, the values of people, or either individuals and particularly community. So that they think they have been deprived of certain freedoms, they've been deprived of certain rights and all that. So a belief like religion is key because religion goes to the core of people's mindset. And this is what I could refer to as fundamental. Fundamental because it goes to the core. Like if you're a Christian, you want to live like Jesus, you want to walk like Jesus, you want to think and believe in things that Jesus did say. So those fundamentalist Christians are said to be born again. And born again, I'm not saying all of them, all these others are not born again, but born again is a term that has been crafted of late in this recent century to mean that these people are believing beyond reasonable doubt. Now, Islam...
Or maybe to make fundamentalism acceptable to Christianity.
Well, fundamentalism is the going to the core or the foundation of a belief. And so being a fundamentalist Christian is not bad. Even being a fundamentalist Muslim
is not bad.
It's not bad. But where the problem comes is for you to go beyond that ticking point and you become radical, you become extreme. So we talk about extremism and radicalism. And this usually goes beyond that. For example, you begin thinking that you're a better Christian than others. You're more Catholic than the Pope. And if you're an Islam person, a Muslim, you want to believe more than even others. You think Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you knew him, you know the Quran more than, or the Hadith more than others. And you want to live and walk the talk more than others. And because of that, you don't want to accommodate alternative views. So once you reach that fundamentalist extremist position, you can do anything because now it borders on values. And once people have espoused a value, they can die for it. They're ready to die for it. So in this case, terrorism, whether it is by Christians like we saw Joseph Kony, or whether it is by Islamic terrorist groups who are also fought by other Muslims, not necessarily secular, but other believers in Islam who believe that those people have gone beyond the scale. These people think they become so intolerable. Like in Somalia, the Al-Shabaab believe that they are the only ones who are true Muslims. The other Muslims in Somalia are not true Muslims, and therefore they do not want to associate with them or a government that supports them from the West or in the region, and so they're ready to die for it. They can die for it. And so it is very important that we think about the software of this aspect of terrorism. And indeed, all strategies of terrorism, counterterrorism, whether the UN level, whether the AU level, whether national level like Uganda, contains preventive measures so that we educate, we guide, and stamp down anything that tends towards extremism and radicalism. And the government has programs in place for that. Also to inculcate into the imams who are out there the sense that they should preach against extremism, against radicalism. And of course, the government also rolls out support to Islamic institutions, learning centers, to ensure that they don't go that extreme. In some countries, people don't bother about what goes on in learning centers. Madrasas, yes, and so people end up being churned out, being extremists and radicals.
Okay, that's interesting. Doctor, it speaks to the fact that maybe the work of thwarting the threat of terrorism is much more than acting on border restrictions of entry, and of course ensuring that maybe equipment and money to fund terrorism does not find its way into the country. We've had our own challenges with the indoctrination that was occasioned upon communities in Busoga region at the height of the ADF activities, and it was believed then that a whole wave of I don't know how to describe it, but it was so strategically positioned to the extent that entire families and communities believed that they had to be moved from Busoga to the Democratic Republic of Congo in order to go and accomplish a divine mission. Now, ensuring that those communities came out of that belief system to begin to engage in productive activity away from terror-related incidents was a huge task for the government, and I'm sure it has gone a long way in helping stave off the threat.
Yeah, sure, you're right on that, but probably I would just like to put a little context to it. I definitely agree with what my good friend Mulongo puts across. And, you know, mind games. And interestingly, by the way, even to counter terrorism, you need mind games. In recruiting, the terrorists deploy mind games.
That's
to
right.
counter, you
also need
mind games.
Yeah.
And the bedrock to this, Chris, like I said, is that the architecture of conflict has shifted. And this is the very first thing that our security actors and any people in governance ought to know, that we have moved away from hard power projections, you know, to an arena of soft power. Now, how does soft power play? I will give you a case study scenario. I already pointed out, for instance, the two pressure points we have, or the two key drivers of terrorism or terror actions or activities in this region. One emanates from Somalia. What happened in Somalia? It's not a question of being Islam or not being Islam, as the Ambassador Mlongo has articulately put across. What actually happened is that Somalia, when it got into a governance crisis and went into that war in 1997, a vacuum was created. There was a territory that was ungoverned. There was a vacuum. Now, these global forces, because it's now soft power or soft interactions, using the internet, using people who go to Mecca, using, you know, different travelers, people meet in airports, these people are recruiting people anywhere. This idea goes into Somalia and finds gravity, and in the process starts to be re-exported, and it comes probably through, or it is traced through the borders with you know, northern Kenya, and then we know that this same group, particularly the Al Qaeda after 2005, have managed to recruit in Kenya. They have recruited in Djibouti. They have recruited in Uganda, because when, say, apprehensions are made, and then, you know, those probably who have been indicted are profiled, you know, you begin to get this information. So profiling in terms of fighting terrorism or in counterterrorism strategy is very key. Now, in these discussions with these people, you get to know how they got here. They begin to explain, how did we get here in the first place? Now, areas like Busoga that you're talking about, you find that many of these places, in terms of fact, are actually, or perceptually, they believe that they are socially, they have been socially excluded.
Yeah.
You know, there are places with low economies, low education, and all that. So it is easy to win over mind. Now, in fighting this, what do you do? That means you need to put your best foot forward. And in putting your best foot forward, you are talking about probably three key things. One, how do you improve the governance spectrum? Particularly focusing those areas. And we've seen Uganda has tried to do that. There is a lot of socioeconomic improvement programs we have done. Lots of monies have been put into youth groups, monies have been put in trying to rehabilitate some of these people who have found themselves victims. But probably where we are still struggling is that how credibly are we doing this? and then you begin to find all these little factors. Oh, corruption. Oh, you know, all these social ills. So when you go and look at the bigger picture, say let's take DRC, you have the ADF, which is the other factor of terrorism for us. And then you have, when you profile, you begin to see the kind of people who have actually been able to move across borders. When you do a socioeconomic analysis of some of the areas they come from, you keep finding the same character showing. So in research, this is what we call causal relationships. Now, the question for me is, if we have found out what these relationships are, these push factors, what exactly are we doing about them? I think that is where we need to put emphasis. And then probably it comes back to our bureaucracy. Just how much does our bureaucracy invest in learning from what they are doing? So,
all right.
Cooperations between research centers like ours. We are doing a lot of work at the Security and Studies Center in Nkumba University. We are producing lots of papers. We are doing lots of analysis. But who is consuming this? We would like to invite some of these actors to come and consume this.
Ambassador Mulongo knows consultancies do take on projects more than centers, scholarly centers. I don't know whether it's because at consultancy level it's a case of paid work. But anyway, that's something that we shall take into the other aspects of our work later today, and indeed the days to come, as the world prepares to, well, commemorate the 9/11. I do hope the alert that has been issued by the United States does provide some bit of perspective for you to be vigilant at individual level, at community level, and also at work. For all those that must ensure that the measures are put in place, including security checks and stuff like that, please ensure that you do that. Let me just have very brief parting shot. Ambassador Mulongo, what can be done in a pointed way?
Well, the advisory that were issued by the UN and the US because of the anniversary of 9/11 are regular. Every year around this time they do that.
Yeah.
And therefore we should not necessarily take them to be very peculiar. So I support the idea that people shouldn't be too much on their toes. However, at all times we're supposed to be alert. We're supposed to be careful, watching out, and to ensure that nothing wrong happens in terms of terrorism, because it is our responsibility as citizens to protect ourselves and our country. So at all times, everywhere and anywhere, let's use our six senses to make sure that we report any unusual things in case it can turn out to be a true terror problem.
All right, Ambassador Simon Mulongo from the Emmons Frontier Governance and Security Consultancy, many thanks for the perspective. It has emboldened our understanding of these matters. And many thanks to you too, Dr. Tolit Atia from the Center for Strategic Studies and Analysis at Nkumba University. I do hope government and other stakeholders do heed your call for collaboration on some of these issues to ensure concerted effort and a rollout of initiatives that are very, very combative in ensuring that we deal with the threats that we face as a country. It's been a pleasure having your company on Morning at 10 TV on behalf of my colleague Priscilla Regina Naloga, and indeed the team behind the scenes that ensures these 2.5 hours are as comprehensive and exhaustively